The silence came first. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a vacuum. The sky was a sharp, aching blue, scrubbed clean of clouds, and the wind, which had screamed for 3 days, was finally gone. Elias Thorne stood at the door of his cabin, the heavy spruce slab rough beneath his scarred hands. He looked out over the valley. It was not his valley, not anymore. It was a blank page, erased by a force that did not know or care for the maps men drew upon it. Where the surveyor's camp had been, down by the frozen creek, there was only white. The new, sharp-angled roofs of eastern pine, shipped at great cost, were gone. The canvas tents were gone. The smokestacks, which had coughed arrogant black smoke against the pristine grey sky, were gone. There was only the snow. It lay in deep sculptural drifts, beautiful and terrible. It looked, Elias thought, like the land was trying to forget. He pulled his buffalo hide coat tighter. The cold was not a number. It was a presence. It waited. It watched. He stepped out onto the packed snow. The crust held his weight. 3 days. 3 days of the world trying to end. Elias Thorne stepped out. The crust held his weight. 3 days. 3 days of the world trying to end. He walked toward the creek. His legs were stiff. The cold had settled deep in his bones, a reminder that time claimed everything. But he was alive. His cabin, the one built of hand-hewn logs, the one anchored to the grey stone of the mountain itself, still stood. It was dark, solid, silent. It looked like it had grown from the earth, just as the Tlingit elder, Cale's father, had told him it must. "You do not build on the land," the old man had said, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "You ask the land to hold you." The surveyors had not asked. They had commanded. And the land had given its answer. He reached the place where the largest structure had been, the cookhouse, a ridge of snow harder than ice, marked where the roofline had tried to fight the wind. Elias kicked at it. His boot hit something solid. He knelt, pulling off his heavy mitten. He dug with bare fingers until the cold bit too deep, then used the handle of his knife. He uncovered a piece of wood. It was smooth milled pine, painted a dark, flat green, eastern wood. It had travelled thousands of miles by ship, by steam, by wagon, only to die here, in the place it did not belong. It was brittle. He snapped it easily over his knee. It felt weightless, hollow. He saw a shape, a dark mound against the unrelenting white. He walked toward it slowly. It was one of the pack mules, frozen solid on its feet, leaning against the drift that had buried it. Its eyes were wide, crystalline. It looked surprised. Elias touched its flank. The hide was like iron. He felt a dull ache in his chest. It was not pity, not exactly. It was recognition. The animal had no say in the matter. It was brought here by the same arrogance that brought the green-painted wood. The surveyors. They were city men. They understood numbers on a page. They understood contracts and shipping manifests and the satisfying sound of a new axe biting into old growth. They did not understand the voice of the mountain. They did not know that the silence before the storm was the most dangerous sound. Elias had tried to tell them. He had walked to their camp 5 days prior, the air still and heavy, the sky a strange, yellowish grey. He had spoken to their leader, a young man named Mercer. Mercer had a clean-shaven face and eyes that measured everything, but saw nothing. "A big blow is coming, Captain," Elias had said, his words simple. "The Aleut wind. It doesn't just pass through, it comes to stay." Mercer had smiled, a tight, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had gestured to his new-built structures, the ones with glass-paned windows and iron stoves. "We appreciate the local color, Mr. Thorne," Mercer had said, his voice crisp. "But we are engineers. We trust in mathematics, not folklore. Our structures are rated for winds twice what this valley has ever seen." Elias had simply nodded. "The wind doesn't use mathematics, Captain. It uses weight." Now Elias stood where that mathematics had failed. He looked back toward his own cabin. It was small. It hunched low against the ridge. The roof was steep on one side to break the wind, and long on the other to hold the insulating snow. The smoke from his chimney did not rise in a straight line. It curled, hugged the roof, and joined the air currents without a fight. His cabin had listened, the surveyor's camp had shouted, and the storm had only heard the shout. He saw a glimmer of movement near the wreckage of what looked like the main barracks, a dark shape, struggling. It was a man, alive. Elias turned his face toward the weak winter sun. It gave no warmth. He felt the weight of the debt that was about to be incurred. He had not asked for this. He had only asked for solitude. But the mountain demanded more. It demanded witness. It demanded that survivors carry the story. He began the slow walk down toward the ruins, his rifle resting easy in the crook of his arm. The snow squeaked under his boots. It was the only sound in the world. This valley has seen many tales. Some are written in the snow and vanish with the spring melt. Others are carved into the stone or into the memory of a man. We sit by this fire to remember them, to understand the weight of a word, the price of a debt, and the strength of a quiet heart. As this story unfolds, think on the land you know. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from, what mountain or river or city shelters you tonight. We are all gathered by the same fire. It had been a month before the blizzard. The valley had been quiet, dressed in the deep green of late summer. Elias was checking his trap lines, not for beaver. He hadn't taken a beaver in 20 years, not since the trade shifted. But for Martin. He worked with a quiet economy of motion. His hands, scarred and brown, moved with a grace that belied his age. He was a part of the landscape. He moved through the alder thickets without a sound. The Tlingit, who traded with him for the steel knives and wool blankets he pulled upriver, called him Gooks, the owl. He did not hunt for profit, not anymore. He hunted for necessity. He hunted for the clean, sharp focus of the task. He hunted to remember who he was. That was when he heard them. It was not the sound of the wild. It was the sound of iron striking stone, the metallic, repetitive clang of progress. He followed the sound, his moccasins silent on the pine needle floor. He stood on a ridge, hidden by the low-hanging branches of a spruce. Below him, the valley floor was a scar. A dozen men, dressed in flannel and canvas, were driving iron stakes into the earth. They were shouting, laughing, their voices harsh and loud in the sacred quiet. They were led by the man he would come to know as Captain Mercer. Mercer was holding a map, a long, white piece of paper. He was pointing, giving orders, imposing his will upon the land. Elias watched them for an hour. They did not look up. They did not see the bull moose watching from the far side of the creek. They did not notice the eagle circling high above, its cry a warning. They were blind to the world they had entered. They saw only the lines on their paper. Elias had felt a coldness settle in him. It was the same coldness he felt when he saw a trap sprung on a non-target, a waste, a disrespect to the animal's spirit. That evening he walked into their camp. The sentry, a young man with nervous eyes, raised his rifle. Elias stopped, holding his hand up, palm open. "I come to speak," he said. Mercer emerged from the largest tent. He was cleaning his spectacles. He put them on and looked Elias up and down, as if he were a specimen, a piece of local fauna. "Can we help you, old-timer?" Mercer asked. His voice was polite but sharp, like a new knife. "This is my valley," Elias said. It was not a claim of ownership, it was a statement of fact. "This is where I live," Mercer smiled. "I'm afraid you're mistaken. This valley belongs to the United States government, by treaty and by purchase. We are the Alaska Survey Commission. We are here to map it, to bring civilization." Civilization. Elias repeated the word. He looked around at the stumps of freshly cut trees, the mud churned by mule teams, the pile of empty tin cans. "Your civilization is loud." Mercer's smile tightened. "Progress is often loud, Mr. Thorne." "Elias Thorne." "Mr. Thorne, we have permits, we have orders. We will be building a permanent outpost here, to winter over, to prove this land is habitable." Elias looked at the plans Mercer was already unrolling on a trestle table. Sharp-angled buildings, straight lines. "You plan to winter here?" Elias asked. "In these? These are modular structures, Mr. Thorne, designed in Boston, the latest in engineering. They will withstand anything the wilderness can throw at them." Elias looked past Mercer, up toward the high peaks. The glaciers were already turning a deep, warning blue. "This land doesn't throw," Elias said. "It presses. It's a weight, Captain, not a blow. Your flat roofs will collect the snow. Your glass windows will burst. Your iron stoves will eat all your fuel before the deep freeze even settles." Mercer rolled up his map. He was annoyed. The conversation was not going as he planned. "We are not savages, Mr. Thorne. We do not live in mud huts. We have mathematics. We have physics. We will be fine." Elias looked at the man's hands. They were soft. They had never been stained by walnut husks or split by frost. "I am not Tlingit," Elias said, "but I learned from them. They have been here 10,000 years. They build low. They build round. They build with the mountain, not against it. Your math is new. Their math is old. Their math works." Mercer stiffened. "I will not have my presence here questioned by a squaw man or the superstitions of his keepers. We are here. We will stay. You are welcome to trade, Mr. Thorne, but not to advise. Good day." Mercer turned and walked back into his tent. Elias stood there for a long moment. The young sentry wouldn't meet his eyes. Elias turned and walked away. He did not go to his cabin. Instead, he made a wide circle, heading upriver toward the high smoke hole of his oldest friend, the elder of the Tlingit clan. He had to warn them, not about the surveyors, but about the type of men they were. Men who did not listen. Men who brought their own destruction with them. The world at stake wasn't the valley. The valley would endure. The world at stake was the idea of the valley, the idea of respect, and it was already being broken. The storm came, as Elias knew it would, not from the north but from the west. It came off the great ice fields of the Bering Sea, a wind born of pure cold. It did not arrive with a roar. It arrived with a whisper. 2 days after his meeting with Mercer, the air pressure dropped so fast it made Elias's teeth ache. The animals vanished. The birds stopped singing. The world went utterly, profoundly silent. Elias stood outside his cabin. He tasted the air. It was dead, static. He closed his heavy shutters, not with glass, but with seasoned spruce boards, reinforced with strips of hide. He checked the seal around his door, a thick braid of marten fur that compressed against the jamb. He climbed onto his roof, a shallow incline he could walk on. He checked the sod. He checked the heavy anchor stones at the eaves. He was not preparing for a storm. He was preparing for a siege. He brought his last cords of wood inside. He filled his water barrels from the spring, knowing it would be frozen solid in an hour. Then he went inside, barred the door, and lit his lantern. The world outside dissolved. The wind began as a high, thin whistle. It was the sound of a knife being sharpened on a distant whetstone. Elias sat at his table, cleaning his long rifle. He moved with deliberate calm. The whistle became a moan. The moan became a shriek. The cabin, built into the mountainside, did not tremble. It settled. It crouched. The logs, cured for a decade, notched with precision taught to him by Cale's father, groaned softly. It was the sound of a great ship settling into a heavy sea. It was a good sound. He thought of Mercer. He thought of the glass windows. They would be the first to go. The glass would shatter, not from a direct blow, but from the pressure difference. The wind would find the smallest crack, the smallest weakness, and it would pry. It would peel the tin roofs back like the lid on a can. The storm was not just wind, it was weight. The snow began. It was not snow as Easterners knew it, soft flakes drifting gently. This was a horizontal wall of ice. It was granular, sharp, like sand. It hit the walls of the cabin not with a thump, but with a high shh, a constant abrasive scouring. It was trying to sand the cabin down, to erase it from the landscape. Elias stoked his fire. The stove was small, stone-lined, efficient. It was Tlingit design. The flue ran under his sleeping platform, a long, rock-lined trench, warming the stones before the smoke ever left the chimney. The heat was radiant, low, and constant. Mercer's men would be huddled around their iron stoves, a circle of fire in a room of ice. They would be burning wood at a furious rate, the heat roaring straight up the chimney, leaving the corners of their engineered boxes lethally cold. Elias ate. He ate slowly. Dried salmon, cold grease, and a hard biscuit. He drank hot, bitter tea. He was fueling his own body just as he fueled the stove. He was a part of the system. For 3 days the world was noise. The sound was so immense, so constant, that it became a new kind of silence. It was the sound of mountains moving, of gods warring. It was the sound of creation and destruction, happening all at once. Elias slept when he could, his body attuned to the rhythm of the cabin. He felt the wind shift, and he knew, even in the darkness, that the snow was now drifting against the south wall, piling up, adding its insulation. The cabin was using the storm against itself. On the 3rd morning, he woke to a profound change. The noise had stopped. The sudden, total absence of the wind was more jarring than its shriek had been. It was the silence he had woken to, the silence of the vacuum. He sat in the dark. He did not move. He listened. He heard the drip, drip, drip of the ice melting near the chimney cap. He heard the slow, heavy creak of 1,000,000 tons of snow settling on the valley floor. He heard his own heart. He was alive. He had survived. But survival was not a victory. It was a responsibility. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than the storm, that Mercer and his men had not. He felt no triumph. He felt only a great, heavy weariness. He stood and put on his coat. He did not make an oath to the sky. He did not curse the wind or the arrogance of men. His oath was quiet. It was an action. He unbarred his door, the heavy wood scraping against a new drift of snow that had piled against it. He took his shovel. He would go see. He would see what the land had decided. He would bear witness. That was the price of living. That was the oath he had made to this valley when he first came, and it was the oath he would keep until the valley finally claimed him too. The storm had passed, but the work of survival had only just begun. Elias Thorne's journey to the surveyor's camp was not long in distance, but it was treacherous in every step. The world was remade. The valley floor, once familiar, was now a landscape of alien shapes. The snow was packed and drifted, hiding the creek, hiding the game trails, hiding the very contours of the earth. It was a journey into a white desert. But as he walked, his mind was not on the cold or on the wreckage he knew he would find. His mind was on another, deeper journey. A journey back 30 years, a journey to the alliance that had saved his life, and which had, in turn, saved his cabin. He was a young man then, arrogant in his own way. He had come west full of fire and vinegar, thinking he could tame the wilderness with nothing but a strong back and a good rifle. He was a fool. He had been trapping alone, deep in the winter. A sudden thaw, followed by a snap freeze, had turned a simple creek crossing into a nightmare. The ice broke. He went under. He had dragged himself out, his buckskins freezing solid, his rifle lost to the current. He was miles from his lean-to, and the cold was a living thing, sinking its teeth into him. He was dying. He knew it. He had stumbled, crawled, until he could go no further. He had collapsed against a fallen log, ready to let the white sleep take him. He had found Cale, a Tlingit hunter, a year earlier, with his leg broken in a deadfall trap set by a careless white trapper. Elias had splinted the leg. He had hunted for Kyle, bringing him meat, staying by his fire until he could walk. It was a simple act of humanity, but to Cale's people it was a debt of honor. An alliance was formed, not with words, but with action. Now Elias was the one in need, and Cale had found him. Cale looked at him, his dark eyes assessing. Elias was a white man, an intruder, but he was the man who had helped him. Cale slung Elias over his shoulder. He carried him. He carried him for miles, back to his people's winter camp, a collection of low, round houses dug into the earth, smoke rising from their centers. Elias woke in a haze of warmth and the smell of cedar. He was wrapped in furs. His frozen clothes were gone. An old woman, Kyle's mother, was feeding him hot broth, pungent with herbs. He was weak. He was ashamed. But he was alive. He stayed with them for a month. He learned more in that month than in 10 years of living on his own. He learned that the Tlingit did not fight the winter. They danced with it. They understood its rhythms. They knew when to move, when to stay still, when to hunt and when to rest. They were a part of the land, not its masters. Kyle's father, the elder, took a liking to Elias. He saw the young man's humbled spirit. He saw the respect that had replaced his arrogance. He took Elias to the edge of the camp and pointed to his own home, a longhouse built of massive cedar planks. "The white man builds a box," the elder said, his voice rough. "He builds a square. He cuts the trees and makes them straight. He fights the wind. The wind always wins." He then pointed to the mountain. "The mountain is not straight. The trees are not straight. The river is not straight. They are strong because they bend, because they fit." When Elias was healed and the spring thaw began, he knew he could not go back to his old way of living. He wanted to build a permanent home, a cabin, but he wanted to build it right. He asked Kyle's father for help. The elder was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. He was repaying the debt. He showed Elias how to build. Not a Tlingit house, but a white house built with Tlingit knowledge. "You must anchor to the stone," he said. He showed Elias how to find the bedrock. "You must use the living wood, the spruce that bends. You must not kill it entirely. You must notch it so it holds itself, a hand gripping a hand." He showed him how to mix the moss and the clay for chinking, a living mortar that breathed. He showed him how to orient the roof, not against the wind, but to use the wind, to let it clear the snow from one side and to hold the snow on the other, as in blanket. "Your cabin," the elder said, "must be like the bear in winter. It must pull the mountain around it. It must sleep and wait." As Elias Thorne walked through the wreckage of the surveyor's camp, this was the journey he was on. He was walking from the past into the present. The cabin that stood behind him was not just his home. It was a promise. It was a story. It was a monument to an alliance, a testament to the simple, profound wisdom of listening. He saw the dark shape of the man, the one he had seen from his porch. It was Mercer. He was alive. And Elias knew, as he drew closer, that the debt was about to be spoken of again. The lesson taught 30 years ago was about to be taught anew. Elias reached the wreckage. The scene was worse up close. The engineered structures had not just collapsed, they had exploded. The wind, finding its way into the hollow, prefabricated walls, had blown them apart from the inside. It was a landscape of shattered lumber, splintered glass, and dark frozen shapes that Elias did not want to look at too closely. Captain Mercer was huddled behind what was left of a stone chimney, the only thing that had offered any resistance. He had wrapped himself in a frozen, snow-covered canvas. He was shivering so violently that the sound, a dry clattering of teeth, was audible in the vast silence. He looked up as Elias approached. His face, the clean-shaven, arrogant face Elias remembered, was now a mask of ice and frozen blood. His spectacles were gone. His eyes were wide, vacant, staring. He was in shock. He did not recognize Elias. He only saw a shape, a man, when he had thought all men were dead. "It's cold," Mercer whispered. The words were meaningless, absurd. "Aye," Elias said. He knelt. He pulled back the canvas. Mercer's hands were exposed. They were a waxy, dead white. Frostbite. Deep. "You'll lose the fingers," Elias said. It was not a judgment, it was a fact. Mercer stared at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. "My men," he stammered. "The mathematics." Elias looked around. Your mathematics didn't account for the land, Captain. He unslung the small pack he carried. He pulled out a strip of dry caribou hide. He did not offer warmth, he offered life. Can you walk? Mercer shook his head. He tried to move and cried out. His leg was angled unnaturally beneath the debris, broken. Elias sighed. It was the sigh of a man accepting a burden he did not ask for. This will hurt, Elias said. He grabbed Mercer under the arms, his grip like iron. He hauled the younger man out of the snowdrift. Mercer screamed. The sound was thin, stolen by the cold. Elias ignored it. He set Mercer down, propped against a larger piece of wreckage. He had to set the leg. Now, before the cold finished the man. He found 2 splinters of the green-painted Boston wood. He ripped strips from the frozen canvas. He pulled Mercer's pant leg up. The bone was sharp beneath the skin. Do not faint, Elias commanded. He put his boot against Mercer's hip, grabbed the ankle and pulled. Mercer roared, a short, sharp sound, and then his head fell back into the snow. He was unconscious. Good, Elias muttered. He worked quickly. He set the bone. He bound the splints. The work was rough, but it was solid. It would hold. He wrapped Mercer in the canvas, then lifted the man in a fireman's carry. Mercer was light, a city man, all arrogance, no substance. The journey back to the cabin was a trial. Elias, old as he was, felt his muscles burn. The snow, which had been his ally, was now his enemy. He sank, he struggled, he cursed, but he did not stop. He was driven by a force older than himself. It was the code of the high country. You do not leave a man to die, not even a fool. Especially not a fool, for a fool's death diminishes the land. He reached his cabin. He kicked the door open. The warmth inside was a physical thing. It wrapped around them, thick and smelling of pine smoke, dried herbs and old leather. He laid Mercer on the sleeping platform, the one lined with warm stones. The captain was stirring, moaning. His eyes fluttered open. And this was the moment. This was the reckoning. Mercer looked around, his eyes wide, disbelieving. He was in a small, dark room. The walls were not flat. The logs were massive, round, and fit together with a precision that seemed impossible. He saw the ceiling, not of boards, but of thick saplings covered in sod. He saw the stove, not of iron, but of stone, built into the wall. He saw the windows, small, covered in translucent oiled hide. He saw a home that was not a box, but a den. He looked at the joints where the logs met the corners. There was no gap. There was no light. There was no draught. He put his waxy hand out. He felt the wall. It was not cold. The massive log, inches from the outside air, was warm. How? Mercer whispered. His voice was raw. It was the sound of his entire world, his mathematics and his engineering, collapsing. Why is it warm? Elias was at the stove, ladling broth into a cup. He didn't look at Mercer. Because it's built right, Elias said. It's built to listen. Mercer stared at the ceiling. The storm, the wind. I heard it. It should have torn this place apart. It tried, Elias said. He brought the cup to Mercer. But the house was anchored. The wind can't move the mountain, Captain, so I built on the mountain. Mercer drank the broth. It burned his throat. It was the first warmth he had felt in days. He looked at Elias, the old man, the local color, the savage, and for the first time, Mercer saw him. You knew, Mercer whispered. You knew this would happen. Elias took the empty cup. I knew the land, Elias said. You knew your maps. The land doesn't care about maps, Captain. It only cares about respect. The reckoning was not in the storm. It was here, in the warmth, in the quiet, in the undeniable shocking fact of the cabin that stood while the engineered world lay in ruins. The days that followed were a quiet blur of pain and healing. Elias Thorne worked with a grim efficiency. He tended to Mercer's leg. He cut away the dead, blackening flesh from the man's fingers, packing the wounds with a poultice of yarrow and moss. Mercer watched it all in a feverish haze. He was helpless. He was a man of charts, of compasses, of rigid authority, and he was now utterly dependent on a man he had dismissed as a relic. The cabin became his world, and in that world he began to see. He watched Elias. He watched how the old man moved. There was no wasted energy. When Elias brought in wood, he brought in exactly enough for the night. When he cooked, he used every part of the animal. When he sat in a stillness that Mercer mistook for laziness, until he realized it was awareness. Elias was always listening to the house, to the wind, to the subtle shift of the snow on the roof. "You have to tell me," Mercer said one evening. His voice was stronger. The fever had broken. He was sitting up, propped against the log wall. "The design, it's not in any book I've ever read." Elias was oiling a trap. He didn't look up. "It's not from a book." "Where then?" Mercer pressed. "The Tlingit," Elias said. The word hung in the air. Mercer, the representative of the United States government, the man sent to map and claim this land from those very people, was silent. You trade with them," Mercer said, trying to understand. "I listen to them," Elias corrected. "There's a difference." Elias finally put the trap down. He looked at Mercer, his eyes clear and sharp. "You came here to conquer, Captain. You brought your boxes and your numbers. You thought you could impose your will on this place. You thought because your tools were new, they were better. You were wrong." Mercer looked down at his bandaged hands. He had nothing to say. He knew the old man was right. "This cabin," Elias continued, his voice quiet, "is a debt. It's a story. 30 years ago I knew a man named Kale. His people have been here since the ice retreated. They know this land. They know its spirit. They know its voice." Elias described the process. He told Mercer about Kale's father, the elder. He explained the foundation. "Your cabins," Elias said. "They sat on the ground. The frost got under them. It heaved them. It broke their backs before the wind even hit." He pointed to the floor. "This cabin is built into the rock. The mountain holds it. We are one piece." He pointed to the corners. "Your men used nails, iron. Iron grows cold. It transfers the frost. It makes the wood brittle. These logs are notched. They are scribe fit. Each log was carved to fit the one beneath it. They hold each other. They are locked together, like a fist. The more weight the wind puts on that wall," he slapped the log beside him, "the tighter the joints become." Mercer's eyes, the eyes of an engineer, widened. He was finally understanding. This wasn't folklore. This was physics. It was just a physics he had never learned. "And the roof," Mercer whispered, looking up, "it's not symmetrical." "No," Elias said. "The wind in this valley only comes from one direction. The west. The west-facing roof is short and steep. The wind hits it and goes up. It can't get a grip. The east-facing roof is long and shallow. The snow sits there. It piles up, 4, 5, 10 feet deep." "But the weight," Mercer protested. "The weight would crush a normal roof." "It's not a normal roof," Elias said. "The snow is a blanket. It's insulation. The storm outside provides the warmth inside. The cabin uses the storm's own power against it." Mercer was stunned. He was shocked. He was looking at a masterpiece of engineering built by a savage and a relic based on millennia of observation. It was a technology of respect. "Why?" Mercer finally asked. "Why did you tell me?" Elias went back to his trap. "Because you asked." He paused. "And because I had to bury 2 of your men this morning, the ones I could find." The words hit Mercer like a physical blow. The reality of his failure, the cost of his arrogance. "You came here to map the land, Captain," Elias said, his voice soft now. "You have your numbers, but you missed the truth. The land is not a thing to be conquered. It's a living thing. You don't beat it. You ask its permission. You listen. And if you're lucky, and if you're humble, it lets you stay." The understanding was complete. Survival without respect was not survival at all. It was just a slower death. The spring thaw came late that year. It came with a slow, grinding roar as the ice on the river broke apart and the valley began to breathe again. Captain Mercer could walk now. He limped heavily, his broken leg healed, but stiff. His hands would never be the same. He had lost 3 fingers on his right hand and 2 on his left. He would never hold a surveyor's transit again. He would never sign his name with the same arrogant flourish. He was changed. He stood at the door of Elias's cabin, the one that had saved him. The air was soft, smelling of damp earth and new pine. I don't know how to repay you, Thorn, Mercer said. He could not meet the old man's eyes. You saved my life. The land saved your life, Captain, Elias said. I just carried you. He handed Mercer a walking stick he had carved from a solid piece of birch. This will help you on the walk out. Mercer looked around the valley. The snow was gone, melted into a torrent that fed the creek. The earth was scarred and raw. The wreckage of his camp was visible, a pile of green-painted trash, already being reclaimed by new weeds. The company will send another team, Mercer said. They'll want to know what happened. Tell them, Elias said. Tell them what you learned. I will, Mercer said. He gripped the walking stick. I'm not sure they'll believe me. They'll say I went mad, that the cold took my reason. It doesn't matter if they believe, Elias said. It matters if you do. Mercer nodded. He looked at his bandaged hands. My career, my work, it's over. No, Elias said. It's just beginning. You were a map maker. Now, maybe, you'll be a storyteller. Maybe you'll teach them something more important than lines on a page. Mercer finally looked at Elias. He saw the wrinkles around the old man's eyes. He saw the quiet dignity. He saw the strength that came not from fighting, but from enduring. He put his good hand on Elias's shoulder. Thank you, he said. Then he turned and began the long, slow limp down the valley, toward the coast, toward the world he no longer belonged to. Elias watched him go. He watched until Mercer was just a small, dark shape against the new green. He did not feel relief. He did not feel victory. He felt only the turn of the season. He turned back inside his cabin. It was quiet. It was strong. It was waiting. He picked up his rifle. It was time to check his lines. The land was awake. Later that summer, a Tlingit canoe came up the river. It was Kyle's son. He brought salmon, fresh and silver. He did not mention the ruined camp. He did not ask about the white men. He and Elias sat outside the cabin. They shared the salmon. They watched the eagle circle. The land remembered. The land endured. The cabin stood. It was more than a home. It was a lesson carved in wood and stone. It was a legacy. There is a courage that shouts and a courage that whispers. There is a strength that breaks and a strength that bends. The high country does not care about the maps we draw or the flags we plant. It does not respect our arrogance, and it does not fear our machines. It respects only time and patience and the wisdom of listening. The cabin built by Elias Thorn, with the knowledge of Cale's father, was a testament to this truth. It survived not because its wood was stronger, but because its idea was wiser. It taught that we are not masters of the wilderness, but a single part of its great, terrible, and beautiful story. We survive not by conquering, but by understanding that our strength comes from our humility. If you enjoyed this story, stay a while longer by the fire. There are more tales from the high country, where honor rides the wind.